It is just a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing Dr. Guillaume Gardon-Mollard, DDS, who graduated from the University of Vergne in 2003. He earned a postgraduate degree in prosthodontics from the University of Paris. He also is a graduate from the Coyce Center in Seattle with John Coyce. He practices in Tours, France, where he maintains a general practice focusing on global treatment planning, combining periodontal, restorative, occlusal, and aesthetic treatments. He also trains students as a visiting professor at Tours University Hospital. He writes a blog called The Dentalist.fr, because he's in France, thedentalist.fr, where he shares clinical and communication tips as well as philosophical ideas and many reading suggestions. He lectures on various topics such as prosthodontics, occlusion, treatment planning, and medical philosophy. He is a loved husband and the stepfather of 3. My gosh, I thank you so much for coming on the show today. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me, Howard. It's a huge honor for me.
Oh, the honor's all mine. So I assume you're a bicyclist if you live in Tours, France.
Well, not actually, but how do you know about the race?
Oh my gosh, that's the biggest bicycle race in the world.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest. Yeah, it's huge.
And it was tough because it's so controversial now because that cyclist was cheating with steroids, Lance Armstrong. And I did the Ironman 3 years in a row, and all the cyclists, they felt sorry for him because they thought that in that sport, everyone was doing it. And I had a lot of patients that played professional sports, and I don't want to say which ones they are because you might be able to trace them to the Cardinals or whatever. But I would ask them, and then I had some retired baseball players, and I asked them, I said, what percent of the professional athletes in football and soccer and all that they've been in the sport that they were in do that type of stuff? And they'd say, well, it has to be at least a third, maybe half. But anyway, I could have taken all those steroids and not been able to ride up the hill one time. I would have needed a truck pulling me up. But the most fun part about the race is just the beauty, just the scenery.
Yeah, I'm sure if you're a cycling fan, you must be into the Tour de France as well. And we had a French humorist who said, if you cut the steroids out in the Tour de France, if you want to make the finish line on the 14th of July, they have to start the race at Christmas, actually.
Yeah. And then they did you see there was a documentary, that other new form of cheating going on where they have an engine in the bar that cranks to the wheel? It is it's an electric powered motor. Yeah. And it was amazing. They fit it inside the frame, and it was going on solid for like 4 or 5 years, and now they have to x-ray the bicycle to see if it has a motor in that thing. And seriously, my view on all that is always this. It's always been the same view when they talk about like even now Russia is in trouble with the next Olympics, and I think it should all be legal only for one reason. I don't care if a bicyclist or a boxer or somebody does that. I care about my 82-year-old mother, and if all those in sports enhancing drugs make you jump a little higher, run a little faster, maybe we'll learn something to apply to all of our grandmas and grandpas that are having a hard time walking up the stairs because they're volunteers to experiment on themselves. What would be the scientific alternative? That I have to buy mice, and then if that works, I got to upgrade to a chimpanzee? I've been to one of those monkey farms in Louisiana, and it's $150,000 to buy a research monkey. Not to mention the monkey oftentimes might die depending on the experiment. And then you have all these athletes that are willing to take it on themselves, and they're not monkeys or rats or chimpanzees, they're actually humans. I wish they would just do a 180 and say, take anything you want as long as you're transparent. And when 8 guys line up with their bicycles, you could sit there and be thinking, well, biker number one's on testosterone, the other one's on human growth hormone, the other,
Yeah.
and let the science begin. Who cares about the race? I just want to get old ladies up the stairway,
That's a point of view of a scientist, but I'm not so sure that people watching it on TV would agree with that, or even politics. But it's a good idea anyway.
Yeah, and the people who don't like the idea, they don't realize how many of the athletes are cheating, and they don't even know. You know what I mean? So,
I think it's. I mean, no sports are.
and by the way, I just want to say for the record, a lot of people think I'm taking a lot of steroids, and that's why I'm so muscular, and I'm not. This is all natural. I haven't even had cosmetic surgery.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm all natural. But my gosh, well, let's start with your website, The Dentalist. Well, you have two. I think of IDWE blogs.
Yes, that's another project. It's not actually my project, personal project, but it's.
So yours is thedentalist.fr.
Yes, it's a very personal blog. I started it in 2013. It was a time where I was feeling a bit depressed about practicing dentistry. Maybe we'll talk about that later. But practicing dentistry in France can sometimes be a bit questioning, and I was asking myself a lot of questions about what to do. I mean, I had issues with the administration here in France, and I thought to myself, okay, if it's about working like this for more than 50 years, I think I'm going to quit before the end. So I needed an escape lane, something or somewhere where I could express my ideas really freely and share my thoughts about dentistry, because I'm really passionate about dentistry. I've always been. I hope I always will be. And I thought it would be great to set a blog on with the idea of sharing tips to young dentists, because I remembered myself being a student, and I started. My idea was to create a blog I would have loved to find when I was myself a student, with clinical tips, thoughts, communication tips, because we are not very well prepared for communication in the field of medicine and dentistry. So I put all my ideas together, and I started off like this. And I loved it. I could spend hours and hours writing and illustrating the posts, it was a really, really nice way to put my ideas all together, to think about what I was doing in dentistry and find a new way of practicing.
That is a beautiful what you just said. What I've always liked, like when I took my family to France several times. By the way, the Louvre. We as Americans, we wanted to go there to see the Mona Lisa. That was the least exciting thing of the Louvre. I mean, my gosh. I mean, how many floors do you have to walk up before you go to the Mona Lisa?
I don't know. It's
8,
the largest
9,
museum
10.
on Earth.
Yeah.
But
the first floor, I think we got there like 8 in the morning. We didn't even get to the second floor till like noon. I mean,
yeah. It takes a lifetime to see it all.
Oh, that's the best thing, because you could stare. The longer you stared at a painting, the more things you'd find. I mean, it was just you'd be looking at some beautiful painting, and all of a sudden you notice there's like a wizard hiding behind a branch. I mean, it's like what? I mean, it was just. And by the time you got to the Mona Lisa, you're like, big deal.
The ancient Egypt section is mind blowing. It's incredible. Yeah.
And I'll tell you the other best thing about going to France. I thought Americans were great sports fans, all fired up, but until you've seen a soccer game in France, you've never even seen a sports fan. I mean, my gosh, they are scale crazier and passionate. I mean, you almost think they were watching their parents fighting for their life. I mean, it was just. I almost wanted to.
I think it's even better in Italy.
Really, Italy?
Yeah, the tifosis in Italy, they're just crazy.
Well, let's. I wanted to ask you a question because the reason I started talking about the Louvre is because everybody knows they like to go to different countries to see different views and different foods and cuisines and architect, and people are always talking about the different way they design buildings. Well, I always found it that way about dentistry. I mean, you got 8 billion people, you got 2 million dentists. There's about a dentist for every 6,000 Earthlings. And they all have the same species, the same disease, the same everything, but they all treat it slightly differently. And I have always been amazed at the variances between a root canal from Brazil to Russia, from France to on. And the only thing I was very upset about France is when I went there and lectured, the Pierre Fichard's Museum was closed for remodel. I'm like, really? Really, you asked me to come speak when the museum was closed? That was so I have to go back.
Yeah, you have to go back.
I got to see
I'll come
that.
with you. I'll come with you, hopefully.
Oh, I would. That'd be so awesome if you gave me a tour of that. But one of the things that was interesting about you just mentioned Italy versus France. Italy at the Cologne meeting, which of course everyone knows. The United States is a very fragmented market. We have 50 states, and each state has an annual meeting, and they have way too many meetings. So most of the meetings are too small, underfunded. Europe just has two big monster meetings. They have one in Cologne every other year, in Cologne, Germany.
Yes.
And then the alternating year is in Paris. And I mean, that Cologne meeting is amazing, but there are now 400 dental implant companies that are original manufacturers, not resellers where they just put a different brand. And 200 of those implant companies are from Italy. I mean, half the implant companies in the world, 200 of them, are from Italy. And then what I thought was very interesting about France, France only has 3 dental specialties. It was real orthodontics, oral surgery, and oral medicine. And I thought it was very interesting. The United States the American Dental Association just added another specialty. There's now 12. And my gosh, when they launched a specialty, it was as controversial as Lance Armstrong. So I was wondering, why do you think the United States has oral surgery, endodontics, perio, pediatric dentistry, ortho, prosthodontics, dental anesthesia, oral facial pain, oral med, oral path, oral radiology, dental public health, and then you're in the country where dentistry started with Pierre Fichard, and you guys only have 3. Why do we have 12 when G.V. Black was only 1 century ago, and you have 3 when you guys started 2 centuries ago?
I'm not sure that having so many specialties is a good idea. I mean, it's my personal take on that, but I'm very, very proud to be a general practitioner, a GP, because dentistry is by itself a specialty, isn't it, in the field of medicine. So if you end up with 12 specialties, at the end, the patient doesn't understand why he has to go to a dentist to get the exam, then to go to another one to get his tooth extracted, then to another one to have his periodontal treatment, and then a fourth one to have the implant placed. So that creates confusion because I think if you over specialize a discipline, the specialists become way too much specialized, and they don't get the whole picture. And it's very important to have a global point of view on the patient. I mean, of course, you cannot master all the procedures in dentistry. It's very hard to master all of them in all its different fields, but you can still have a clear idea of what the diagnosis is, so you can maybe orient the patient on his medical journey. So I would say I'm very, very proud to be a GP, because even if I try to push things a little forward in prosthodontics, on occlusion, or in aesthetics, I'm still the doctor to whom the patients refer to. I mean, if they have a problem in their mouth, they have to seek you have to see a dentist, a general dentist. So that's my point of view on that. And there is a saying, I mean, I can't remember who said that, but if your only tool is a hammer, at the end, everything will look like a nail.
That was poetic. I mean, dentistry already is a specialty, so really the dental specialties, would you say they're dental subspecialties?
Well, yeah, in some way, yes, I think. I mean, for here in France, if you're a GP and you want to practice orthodontics, there's no problem with that. If you want to be a recognized specialist, you have to get a degree in orthodontics. If you want to practice implants, there is no specialty. If you want to do endodontics, no specialty. But you need some postgrads or education on your field of expertise. But the problem is with overspecialization is that at the end, I go to the hospital sometimes to train the students. We have patients referred to for an extraction just because the general dentists don't want to do that. I mean, what's the point of being a dentist if you're not able to take a tooth out? I mean, or do a root canal. I mean, that's the basis of our job is doing extractions, root canals, prosthodontics. I mean, if you're too afraid of some procedures, sometimes, of course, it's too difficult. It gets too technical, and you need to ask for help from another specialist. But we should all consider ourselves general practitioners and have a more global view on our patients, not just about specialties.
I love that, man. Dentistry already is a specialty in its own right. And I agree with you. When you look at the 12 what they call specialties, what I think are really subspecialties of dentistry, one of them is dental public health. And they're always complaining that 8.5% of the people that show up at the emergency rooms, it's odontogenic in origin. And it's like, and then you meet dentists who say, I can't pull a tooth and I don't do root canals. Well, you should give your dental license to someone who will move to this country that will do it. Because,
yes.
I mean, could you imagine showing up at the hospital and say, I broke my leg? And they said, well, we don't do legs. You need to find another hospital that does legs. I mean, you have to triage them and get them out of pain. And if you can't pull the tooth, you didn't get the right amount of training. I mean, if you would have went to my school, I mean, God, Matt Horgan, those guys made us pull 75 teeth before we graduated. 75. And what was funny with Matt Horgan is if you went in there and you said, Dr. Horgan, I can't get it out. And he says, you've only been in there 20 minutes. Don't come back for an hour. I mean, he was like, you're going to get that tooth out all by yourself, big boy. And he was a great man.
Howard, sorry to interrupt you, but what I see when I talk with students who just came out of dental school here in France, the funny thing is that they as soon as they get out of the dental school, they want to settle as perio implants practitioners. I mean, I tell them, what? I mean, you want to only do implants and you don't even know how to do complete dentures or fixed prosthodontics or even perio? I mean, that's a nonsense, actually. I think it's a shame.
I want to, I call my show Dentistry Uncensored because I don't want to talk about anything anyone ever agrees on. I like to go to the most controversial part. And when I think of what is the most controversial part of France, I mean, obviously they started dentistry with Pierre Fichard when he published his... when did he publish that book? In 1728.
That was 18th century.
Oh my gosh, 1728. Oh, by the way, you know what I wish you would do for all the English-speaking dentists around the world? Because that is nobody has ever taken Pierre Fichard's book and done an audiobook in English. Every audiobook I found is in French. And I'm linguistically challenged. I only got one D in my life, and it was in Spanish. And my teacher, San Martin, told my mom, he goes, your son, he can't do foreign languages. And then my piano teacher fired me, kept my 5 sisters on every Wednesday, but said Howie couldn't carry a tune in a lunch pail. So I know my chances of learning French good enough to read Pierre Fichard's book is 1 in a million, but there's no audio version of Pierre Fichard's book. How long would it take you to just sit down and read the book into your iPhone?
I don't know. I've never read the book, actually. Pierre Fichard is not very well known here in France. I know that you have the Pierre Fichard Academy in the US, but here in France, it's not very well known. We have some very, very renowned dentists around here. Maybe you've heard of Bernard Toiti.
Sure.
He was the editor-in-chief of PPAD, the journal. We had Gérard Chiche. You know him? Is now a fantastic teacher. I think it's at the University of Louisiana.
Oh, nice.
Gérard Chiche.
Gerald Chiche, yeah.
Gérard Chiche, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
We also have François Duret. Is the guy who invented the whole concept of intraoral scanner for digital impressions. I mean, the technology was actually born here in France.
Yeah, I just did a podcast with a prosthodontist, I think who married the son of Gerald Chiche. But anyway, but the reason I want to put the book is because I got on, when eBay went public in 1994, first thing I started doing is looking for G.V. Black's books. I found the first 3 books written and autographed and signed by G.V. Black, and I was so excited. In fact, they're just right around the corner from me right here. And it was so profound because I had no idea that just a century ago, I mean, here's the father of American dentistry, the biggest name in American dentistry, and he's talking about trephinating holes above the abscess tooth to let the evil spirits out. And then he's drawing the evil spirits, and they all look like court jesters with like hats on with little bells and feet. I'm like, because a lot of times young kids get so frustrated at how everything's going. And then I remind them, okay, 100 years ago, you knew they were letting evil spirits out of the tooth, right? We've come a long way, but it doesn't seem like we've come a long way in the last 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. And I'm dying to find out what Pierre was saying a century before G.V. Black, because G.V. Black thought he was making holes to let evil spirits out. I'm like, oh my God, what? And because Pierre Fichard, he was at the time, they were barber surgeons, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And he was the one, he said, let's forget the hair thing and let's just do dentistry. And who knows how crazy the ideas were 200 years ago. I mean, and you remember the Chinese thought there were dental worms in the teeth.
Yes,
and,
right.
My gosh. So, yeah, but I think someone someday somewhere has to do an audio book.
I'll try my take on that. I will get myself a copy of the book and see if it's not too, it could be written in old French, ancient French, and so it might get a little bit tricky to have it translated in English. But I'll give it a try.
That's why a French dentist who can smooth it out. It has to be. Yeah. Maybe you could just sit in the museum and read it.
It's still very interesting. We have many dentistry museums here in France, and it's always really, really interesting to see the evolution of the equipment, the chairs. I mean, you Americans gave the dentistry a very important evolution with the dental chair. But here in Europe, we have a very, very long history for medicine and surgery, especially in France. Yeah, that's right.
My gosh, yeah, I love your articles. And one of the things I thought was interesting is you wrote an article. Do you still know how to present a clinical case? I'd like to remind the kids that when I came out of school in '87, if you said, I'd like to sell dentistry, all your peers like, did you just say sell? Did you just say the M word? Are you talking money? And then a lot of times when you talk to dentists, they say, hey, I didn't go to school 8 years to be a salesman. I'm not a used car salesman. Dentists. They don't want to see themselves as a salesman. So I like the way you said, do you still know how to present a clinical case? There were no trigger words in there that made them, fall out of their chair. But how do you get a dentist to realize this? Like right now, my 4 kids have turned into 6 grandkids. And my grandkids, my oldest one's 13. And I know that in the circle of life, before they have kids, I'm gone. And if they could go to 2 dentists, and one dentist could not present the treatment, say they had 4 cavities and needed 4 fillings, and present it to them, and they thought, I'm not interested. And the other dentist got them to realize that it's a $250 filling right now. And if you walk out that door and don't do anything, a couple of years from now, it's going to be 4 root canal buildups and crowns. And then if you still don't do anything, it's going to be, you know what I mean? I need you to get the money out of my grandkids' pocket before all the iPhones and trips and Disneylands and movies and records and fancy shoes and clothes. So how do you get dentists to present clinical case? They don't even measure their treatment plan presentation success rate. You say, well, of the last 100 cases you presented, how many accepted treatment? They don't even know. They don't even track it. And from a public health point of view, that's everything.
It's a really important issue here that you raise. I mean, actually, the focus on this article you just mentioned wasn't about treatment planning presentation. It was just about clinical case presentation, because I get very upset when I go on Facebook, which I don't really often do, but on Facebook, I think we're losing this skill. That's a really basic and fundamental skill for doctors, is to present a case to their peers. Actually, and it has to be structured. What we see on Facebook is just pictures, and the description of the case is way too short. We don't get the full picture here. It's just showing off what you can do and your techniques and everything. So I wanted to do this article to remind everyone, especially the young dentists, that presenting a case to a staff or to your peers or to another dentist or to another doctor actually requires methodology. So that's a different thing. What you mentioned about treatment planning presentation is something also very important, because I think the first thing is that the dentist himself has to understand and be convinced of what is diagnosing. I mean, it's very important to focus on diagnosis rather than focusing on treatment. We are a specialty that is obsessed with technicity. I don't know if that makes sense, but we focus too much on the procedure, not on the diagnosis. And, when I spent days with John Coyce in Seattle, he taught us that a patient will never engage treatment if for something that he is not aware of. So it's very difficult to educate the patient on what you, the dentist, are seeing in his mouth. So it's very, very relevant and important to have the patient on the same page. So it takes time. That's true. I think that's another aspect of another problem in our profession, is that we are obsessed with speed. We want to go faster and faster, but communication takes time. It takes time to sit face to face with the patient and show him the radiographs, showing the pictures you've taken in his mouth, show him that even if it's not painful, if it's not broken, still it could be painful later or break off later.
Very well said. I really like that a lot. The other thing that's kind of gross on social media is when they're posting pictures and making fun of somebody with a disease. You don't see other doctors in other
and
specialties.
That's a shame, because even patients can go on the internet and see doctors making fun of patients, and that is not acceptable, I think. We should be very, very more careful with what we say and write on social medias, because the patients can access that, and it's not a very good picture that we show to patients.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you the most controversial thing. When I think of dentistry in France, the most controversial thing is the French dentists are willing to go on strike over pay. And in America, striking is very interesting. Like, the auto industry does it, but the computer industry's never done it. There's never been a strike at Microsoft, Intel, Hewlett-Packard, Facebook, Google. So the tech sector never does it, but the airlines, the pilots do it all the time. The auto workers do it all the time. And the dentists are sitting there thinking, okay, so if me and you talk about our fees and compare our fees, that's illegal. That's go to jail stuff. But the insurance companies do it all day long. You know what I mean? The insurance companies are saying, sign with me because I only pay the doctor $600 for a crown, so my insurance is cheaper. Then the next insurance company's like, well, we pay $700 for a crown, but we have more dentists on our list. And then if 3 dentists say, hey, let's all get together and say we're not even going to do a crown unless they pay at least $700. Dude, that's jail time. We'll go to jail for that. It's called the McCarran Act. And like the other day, like there was on the news here, who knows how reflective the news is of your life out there, but we're seeing in France where the government passed a bill and said, well, you can't film the police officers. And the people are like, really? And then they went down and like, we'll knock your building down. And it's like, well, and that principle is transparency. There's only 2 principles I've learned from 5,000 years of history, and that is, you got to have transparency because I don't know what you're doing. It could be very bad. And there's got to be checks and balance. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I think Americans, dentists, have been really beaten up by the dental insurance companies. And the lawyers have made it that if we fight back, we'll go to jail. But the French are like, my gosh, you mess with me, the first thing we're going to do is turn over your tractor, knock down your building. I love their passion. I mean, they're just not afraid to say, not only do we disagree, we're going to knock your building over. So am I getting the story right? I mean, are you part of a union?
It's funny. It's funny what you're saying, because I know that the image of French people over the world is quite difficult to understand. France is a very unique country with its very unique way of thinking, and let me put it this way. First of all, France is a chance, I think, because France is a chance. I mean, to be in France is a chance. We have a political system and a philosophy here, a very strong heritage, which is very different from what you have in the US. Here we have right and left political parties. Okay, so the French right wing is still socialism. Don't think it's like the Democrats. We're not even close here. It's true that Europe in general has a very strong heritage for social democracy, but the word liberal here in France is a very bad word. Did you know that the Ayn Rand book, Atlas Shrugged, was not translated? I think it was even censored here in France for decades, and just until recently it has been translated into French, and I read it, but no one ever hear about that. So yes, we have a very a political commitment here in France. So we have unions. Dentists, they do have unions. But
Dentists have unions.
Yes.
Wow.
But we have a very strong influence of the government and the state on health policies. That's our heritage. I mean, the French health policies rely on the Sécurité sociale. It's a national health insurance system. So it's a great thing. Don't get me wrong here. It's a very great thing. It has no equivalent in the world. Maybe in Cuba, not sure. But when it comes to cancer treatments, for instance, and other life-threatening disease, everything is paid by the government, the state. It's a solidarity system that we have here in France, which is absolutely great. But the problem is there are a few downsides to that. Is that the state is regulating, the government is regulating the healthcare providers. So basically, technically, on the paper, we are liberals, but our boss is the national health insurance system, who tells us how we should treat, for how much we should treat, and who we should treat. And now we have private insurance companies coming on the market, and they are making things even more difficult for us. I don't know if you have an idea of the fees, the dental fees here in France.
I do not.
Man, stay seated because you're going to fall off your chair. For a root canal on an endo, on a molar,
$100 US.
Even less, $90, 90 euros for a root canal on a molar. I mean, for an extraction, even if you spend an hour on it because it's difficult, you will get 33 euros, which is actually $30.
For a filling?
No, for an extraction.
Oh, so a root canal is $100.
Yeah, $100.
$100.
And an extraction would be less than $35.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that?
Now I did 2 or 3 podcasts from France for live from France and location, and the same with Tokyo and London. And this was a couple of years ago, and I was explaining that when you're in Tokyo, where the land costs $1 million a square meter, and they give these Japanese dentists $100 for a root canal, well, they can't do it, so they all extract the tooth and do an implant because the implant isn't covered. And
exactly.
and then you tell policy people or government people or insurance people what's going on, and they say, "Oh, a doctor would never do that." And I'm like, "Well, they all told me they do that in all 3 countries." So yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but yeah, it's. I mean,
that's a very very important issue. I mean, regarding the ethics of our job, of our profession, I mean, I'm a convinced liberal in the way that I think I will never let someone who has not studied medicine or dentistry tell me how I should treat a patient. I mean, I studied for that. I studied hard, and I'm still studying very hard to provide the best treatments for my patients, because I'm treating individuals on my dental chair. But the recommendations we get from the government, they are based on health policies. I mean, I don't know how to call it. I mean, population studies. So that's there's sometimes there's a gap between the two, and we have to stay very, very strong on ethics on that, because at the end, I mean, when I was talking about cancer treatments or very heavy treatments, France is a chance. Of course, you have the national security health insurance systems, but dental medicine is different. It's a different game. We're not talking big risks here. So I think we should give the patients the freedom to choose his treatment. I'm very, very upset when I hear that insurance companies are trying to get the patient towards their networks, because that's a fundamental freedom for patients to choose who his doctor will be and what kind of treatment he will receive. That's so the deal now in many Western countries, and I think everywhere in the world, is to give away that freedom of choice for reimbursement, right?
Yeah, and you also said something very profound that I want to make sure the kids here that didn't fly over the kids here. About a quarter of our viewers are still in dental kindergarten school, so they probably haven't even done their first root canal or crown yet. But when you study geometry, you know, terms like sine, cosine, and tangent are exact words around the world. But sure enough, when you talk political terms, it means something different in every country. And in the United States, the term even means something different for each century. So a conservative in this century is very different than the last century, and there's nothing scientific about their terms. I wish they were more like dentist and geometry and used international terms so everybody know what we're talking about. But I do think that the United States, I notice on Dental Town, I've had this site since 1999 and it's 2020, but 21 years of this crap, I can see the dentists in America getting closer and closer and closer to a union. And one day I think they might pass the deal. Everybody wants me to ask every dentist that comes on. So I'm going to ask you, this is great because you're from France. They want to know exactly, would you take the vaccine today?
Probably yes. Yeah. I'm still waiting a few weeks until I get some more results coming out of the medical journals to see if it's safe enough. It looks safe enough, but I want to make sure about the side effects or things like that. But I'm not. I've been vaccinated for flu since I was a kid, and never had any problem with that. But the funny thing is that we invented vaccines here in France with Pasteur, and now we have more than half of the population in France who is reluctant on getting the vaccine. Isn't that crazy?
Well, so you know how the Christians always say that humans are born with original sin. You've heard that, right? That Christians were born with original sin. And my two older sisters went straight into the Catholic nunnery, straight out of school. You know, they're Catholic nuns. And it took me a long time to figure out, well, what were they talking about? Because, you know, religion's been around for 5,000 years. Right now, there's like 1,100 different religions practiced. And you go back in time, they think there's been 10,000 different religions. They've never found a society without it. And I think the original sin is that you're born a wild Homo sapien. You know what I mean? That's the sin. And the sin is you have these goals that I don't want to be an animal. I want to be a human in God's image. Well, dude, you got a long way to go because you started out a crazy animal. You wrote a very interesting article, which is when I said COVID-19, how to end it. Sitting where you're at, where, you know, in America, we can see what Canada did, Mexico did. But man, the 20 smartest countries got to be all in Europe. So you've seen a big variance of the COVID. What lessons do you think we learned? Because I got out of school in '87, and my first virus rodeo was HIV and AIDS, and it changed everything. That was why dentists started wearing gloves. We had to get rid of our cuspidors where we spit in the bowl, and the patients missed it. And I mean, I could remember. You hear all this mask stuff. I remember dentists in Wichita that said, "Come here in my office." And right by his office, he had his 12-gauge shotgun. And he says, "Well, that government man comes in here and tells me I got to wear my gloves. That's what I got waiting for him." And I'm like, whoa, slow down. They
would be smoking in the operatory at that time.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
So it's like, this rodeo looks exactly like the last one, but AIDS changed dentistry. They got him to wear gloves and mask and all this stuff, and this one is another. You know, if you don't have any competition, it's not going to make you. Competition makes you bigger, stronger. How do you think? What grade card would you give the dentist with AIDS? What do you think they learned? I mean, with coronavirus, what do you think they learned from AIDS that got us ready for this one? And what changes do you think we're making for SARS that are here to stay for when we even get the next one? Yeah. Because some people are doing crazy stuff like negative air pressure rooms and things like that.
Yeah, but that's crazy. Yeah.
What did and by the way, I loved your article, COVID-19, How to End It.
Oh, thank you.
Go to thedentalist.fr to read it.
Okay, this virus is a very, very bad virus because HIV hit us on our sexual behaviors. This new virus hits us on our social behaviors, at the very core of our social behaviors. So I think it will first. I think it will have a dramatic impact on our lives. I mean, we are all seeing that it's hard. I think it's going to get harder, and it will take years before we go back to normal. Having that said, you know, when the pandemic struck in March, actually myself, I was a bit in advanced facing it because, as I told you, I don't use social networks for my friends and family and sharing lolcats videos. I use it on a professional purpose. I'm following the best medical journals in the world, and it got my attention. I mean, I saw more and more articles coming out about this new coronavirus in China. And I had been in China in 2000, in the late 90s and 2000, and I was seeing those images on television about empty streets in China. And man, I have to tell you, if there's one thing I've never seen when I was in China is an empty street, because at any time of the day or night, there's people everywhere. And seeing all those pictures and images from China, I said, something is going wrong. I think something is going on there. And when the virus hit Italy, that was the beginning of March, I switched my television to the Italian networks, and I understood that it was really, really bad there. But here in France, it was just business as usual. I mean, on TV, same political debates, and everything was no, it's no problem. The politicians, health minister, no problem with the virus. It's all under control. So I said, okay, I think I'm going to move a little earlier on that. So I took some measures here in my practice to get rid of the magazine in the waiting room, to have the patients wash their hands as they come in the practice, stop shaking hands or do la bise. You know, we do la bise in France. I mean, kiss each other on the cheeks. So I stopped doing all that, and I bought myself a stock of gloves and masks, high protection masks. But we all went to it all came down to a shutdown, and everybody was saying that dentistry would be the front line for the virus. I mean, death was expected for a dentist, actually, if you remember that. Dentistry was classified as a very, very, very high risk of contamination. And actually, it proved to be wrong, because I heard that less than 1% of dentists in the US got infected, and we're not even sure they got infected in the practice. So that shows us that dentistry is a very, very efficient profession in regarding hygiene and hygiene procedures. I mean, we are used to work with masks and gloves and it's not the first virus we have to face, is it?
No.
We as you mentioned, it's HIV, we have herpes virus, we have so many different germs just in front of our eyes, and we have to be careful about that. So it's not new to us. And often I have patients asking myself, "Oh, is it going? How are you dealing with all this coronavirus chaos?" I say, "I'm okay, you know, because I'm used to it. I mean, it's easier for us than it is for a clothes shop or a bank or a restaurant, you know, because we are used to it. We know we studied virology and hygiene and
you know how many viruses I have to worry about just when I'm working on my mom? I'm just kidding. Yeah, it's crazy. You know, again, back to that variance. I love the variance. Like French doctors can have a union, and America we'd go to jail. You know, just all the different things. What variances do you see in all your neighbors? I mean, you got 20 countries all around you in one little Europe. What variances do you see that you're sitting there thinking, look how that country's doing something that really makes us ought to rethink the way we're doing something? How could the dentist over there be different than over here? And I think their ways showing a difference. What variances get you excited?
You know, we have many different styles of dentistry here in Europe, and we have a lot of great dentists all over the place. I mean, you probably know English-speaking dentists like in the UK or in Ireland, but let me tell you, we have Scandinavian dentists. Brenmark was one of them. They invented the implants. They are very good in cardiology or prevention. I mean, those guys are great. We have German-speaking dentists. I mean, Germany and Austria and some parts of Switzerland. I mean, those guys are really, really good at performing procedures in dentistry. They're doing a great job. We also have great dentists in Eastern Europe, like in Poland or Romania. I mean, some dentists there are doing outstanding treatments. I mean, you just check them on the social medias. It's just mind-blowing what they're doing. We also have great dentists in Italy. You know, Italians do it better. They have a very strong artistic feeling. They are very good in perio, like all the Zucchelli and Mombelli and Cortellini. And they're also very good in prosthodontics, like Mauro Fradiani. I had a chance to have a chat with him, and he's great. He's a great teacher, and he's really good on occlusion as well. So if we compare all these countries, there are some difference, of course. And sometimes when I compare the dentistry we have in France, I feel a bit frustrated. For instance, we don't have hygienists. Can you believe that?
They just don't exist?
It's forbidden.
Oh my God! And now the Americans
I have to do the hygiene myself, because some dentists, you know, we have unions among dentists, but dentistry, I mean, dentist is not a very united profession, because there are different types of unions. You have the liberal unions, you have the social democrats unions, and they don't get along very well altogether. So some of the dentists here are very afraid that some hygienist would steal the job away from them. So they want to keep that. But the downside is that the periodontal status of the French people is very, very low. I mean, periodontology in France doesn't exist actually until very, very lately. But that's a problem we have. We don't spend enough time and effort and money on prevention, because we have this social security system that take the decisions for us. I mean, we lost our power of decision for what is good for our patients. Now the states do that for us. I think it's a problem because we all know that governments they are not good at dentistry. Have you ever seen a government good at dentistry? I've never seen a dentist in a government.
What I can't understand is, these soldiers go to war, and America's in the longest war they've ever had, 19 years long. I mean, World War II was 4 years, the Civil War was 4 years, this Afghanistan's 19 years, and they come back and they have post-traumatic stress disorders, and a lot of them, their teeth have been blown out. And the military, those are the two things that the health insurance doesn't cover. It covers everything but psychiatric and dental. And I'm like, are you out of your mind? And I go, there's a homeless clinic that's all vets down in Phoenix that a good friend of mine's been running for years, and it's just insane, some of the policies. But anyway, even if you are a vet, and they're not going to cover psychiatric, and they're not going to cover a dentistry, you could only go to a VA hospital. And then the VA hospital, just Google it. I mean, they're like some of the most mismanaged hospitals in the world. It's like, well, why wouldn't they just give them an insurance card? Because it really breaks my heart when I'm in some small town like Beeville, Texas, and I'm talking to some vet, and he's like, yeah, I want to go to this doctor, but I have to drive all the way into San Antonio or Houston to go to the VA. And I'm like, well, if you just had standard Blue Cross and Blue Shield, you go to any damn doctor that you want to go to. So yeah, but I've never been a fan of government. I think they're crazy. I want to go. When I look through 5,000 years of recorded history, to me it looks like the government has caused most of all the problems. They haven't been the solution. I mean, just on murder rates, it looks like in the last 5,000 years, governments killed 6% of the population, whereas your own family killed 1. So every time you've thought about killing your mom, the government's killed 6 people. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me. But I want to go to something else. Over here, they always say, well, in Europe, they banned amalgam, and, we got to ban amalgam. And that really bothers me because I've done missionary dentistry in Africa and Asia and North America, down in Mexico. And, silver filling, I don't need perfect isolation. I don't need a rubber dam. It's made out of metal. It's going to get killed by bacteria, and half of this amalgam is mercury. That's antibacterial. The other half, silver diamine fluoride. Tin, stannous fluoride. I mean, it's just this heavy metal, antibacterial. And then I was in a couple different countries in Africa, and I watched them doing, they said they're all proud because they don't do amalgams anymore. They do the high-tech technology, but they don't have an assistant. They don't have high-speed suction. And this patient is doing a procedure, and every 5 minutes she sits up and rinses her mouth out with a Dixie cup and spits in a bucket, and he's still doing the bonding procedure. And I'm like, okay, this is a disaster. But if it had been amalgam, and one thing that rich people do the most against the poor is a rich person will have 5 options, and a poor person will have 1, and they vote to take away the 1 option from the poor. Like, if you're rich, you could have a gold filling, a tooth-colored filling, and an amalgam. But then you get together and you take away the 1 amalgam from the poor guy. I mean, look at phones. There's 8 billion people. 1/3 of them have a smartphone like you and I have. 1/3 only has a cell phone. There's no internet connection. And 1/3 has nothing. Are you telling me that when 1 out of 3, 8 billion Earth patients don't even have a cell phone, that you're going to take away their amalgam?
Totally true.
And they always say, well, they did it in Europe, because Europe is the advanced country, and we're the young, crazy cousin. And they always say, well, Europe banned it, and they say the same thing about water fluoridation. They say, because water fluoridation, like, everybody who has a good job always drinks bottled water. I don't see anybody with a good job drinking out of a toilet or a sink or whatever. But when I grew up, the best tasting water in our house was the garden hose. And when you came home from school, you turned on the garden hose, and the poor people, they can only drink out of the community water supply. So when you put fluoride in there, that guy can't afford to go to the dentist. And for 13 cents a year, it prevents about $100 worth of dentistry a year. And who takes away the fluoride in the water? Some rich guy drinking bottled water. It's like, if you got 5 options and that guy over there only has one, don't take away his only one option. But I want to put facts to myth. Is it true that Europe banned amalgams because of mercury and they banned water fluoridation?
First of all, amalgam is not banned here in France. We can still use it if we want. And water fluoridation is not banned as well. I mean, we still use that, but there are some controversies over that. I mean, some people here now they are very suspicious on amalgam and fluoride. So I really agree with what you said, because this raises very, very important philosophical issues. We have to make sure that what we do stays affordable to the majority. I mean, it's nice to go to conventions, lectures, and to see some very high-profile dentistry performed on very rich influencers on Instagram. But okay, but that's nice, but that's not the majority of our patients. I mean, in all of my patients, I only have one influencer on Instagram. The rest of them, they come from the countryside. I mean, they want efficient and long-lasting dentistry. And of course, amalgam is a very useful tool. It has proven its efficiency. So I don't use it myself because I think my patients wouldn't love it because it doesn't look good. And I still have my amalgams on myself. I wouldn't change them for anything because they've been here for 35 years. But when I do a composite, I want to do it the way it should be. I mean, using rubber dam and be very, very careful with the procedure. Problem is in France that the cavity, I mean, whether you use amalgam or composite or glass ionomer, you get paid the same. That's the crazy stuff about our social system. Is that it doesn't make a difference. I mean, we'll see that at the end of the road. So we were talking about vaccines earlier. There are more and more people who are very suspicious about amalgam and its toxicity. I wrote an article on that. Amalgam has proven its efficiency over the years now. I mean, it's very stable, as you said. It's antimicrobial. It's a fantastic material. It doesn't look good, so it doesn't reach the aesthetic standards.
I love the picture you
nowadays
used on the COVID-19, how to end it. That picture, that red virus with its spikes blowing off. It's a cool picture. That looks like that could go in the Louvre. I don't know where you found that picture, but that was a very cool picture. Another thing they say, this is what salesmen say in America about Europe. They say only the Americans use this high-speed hand paste where you have an air compressor and put all this plumbing. In Europe, they all use electric hand pieces. In America, first of all, is that true? Do more dentists in France use an electric motor high-speed handpiece, or is it an air-driven wind turbine?
I use both of them. I don't know. I think it's the majority of us who have both, but some of them depend on the procedure. I mean, with the electric handpiece, you get more precision. You can have it. You can use it low speed. And for instance, prepare a finishing line for veneers or crowns. It's easier, but when you want to blow out the whole wall of a tooth, you need the power of the handpiece. I mean the air one.
I don't want to bring up the Louisiana Purchase, but we actually bought the huge piece, the biggest real estate purchase our country ever made was from, it was either the Russians when they sold Alaska, or I think the Louisiana purchase was bigger than that. And so when you think of French in America, you think it's starting at New Orleans, going all the way up, all the way to French Quebec. But there's, there's so many French-speaking countries. Do you think all the French-speaking countries, is there anything you think they do more unique in dentistry than the rest of the world? Would they have any signature dental trait that you'd say, they must be a French dentist?
I listened to the podcast you made with Philippe Salah.
Yes.
Recently, and he said something which is very true, that French people are good at inventing things, but they are not good at making a business out of it. I mean, which is quite ironic, because entrepreneur is a French word, but we are not good entrepreneurs, because there is always this feeling of guilt regarding money and business, and a kind of suspicion with entrepreneurs. I don't know if we, as I told you, Pierre Fauchard made a landmark in dentistry. So did François Duret with the intraoral scanners. We are able to provide dentistry to the many. I mean, dentistry is cheap here in France. I mean, for the most of it. I mean, for basic care, it's very cheap and affordable, and that's a great thing. But it has a downside. Let me tell you a story. I have a friend who was a dentist in Brazzaville, Congo. There are a lot of oil companies employees. So he got to treat people coming from all over the world, like from America, from Europe, from China, from Australia, everywhere. And he once told me, that the patients who have the worst periodontal stages are the French. The patients who have the more caries, they are the French. And the people who are the more reluctant on taking a penny out of their pocket when it comes to paying the bill, they are the French. So we believe in our culture, medical care should be free, which is a great thing, but it also creates problem regarding the quality of the care that you provide. The French Revolution actually, who inspired, it started in the 18th century. It was a liberal revolution. But as I told you, now we are not in a very liberal state of mind. And you mentioned Louisiana. Do you know that I was born in the countryside, in the province called Auvergne? I used to live very close from where the Marquis de Lafayette was settled. He was named general by George Washington, and he had a very decisive impact on the Battle of Yorktown. But I think we have a very, very strong connection, France and America. I mean, historical roots and ideas, but like cousin, it all went apart from each other.
Yeah, I want to ask you, I can't believe we went over an hour, but can I keep you for overtime? Because
sure.
You're a prosthodontist, and what we talked about how, in geometry, you can go from Kansas to Kathmandu, and they still say sine, cosine, tangent. Political terms are crazy. But you know what? You go around the world, and you would think the hard thing to teach someone would be an extraction or a root canal. But they come out of school, and they tell you the thing they know the least about. It's still occlusion. And treatment planning. And why, as a prosthodontist, why is occlusion still a mystery at the end of dental school, but not pulling a tooth or doing a root canal? Why is that? Why is that? And, first of all, do you agree with that?
That's a great question. I totally agree with you. I was as confused as you said when I got out of dental school. Very soon after graduation, I felt that I needed to understand more the occlusion. So I started going to lectures and reading books on occlusion. I did this degree in prosthodontics in Paris. We talked a lot about occlusion. But as years went by, I was still confused about it. I went all over the place. I went to Paris. I went to Marseille. I went to Austria to see Slavicek and his theories on gnathology and the new gnathology concepts. And I was trying to apply that on my patients. And even if I thrived to do it exactly as the textbooks say, still sometimes it wouldn't work. And I wanted to understand why. I did everything the textbook said, and still it fails. I had a complication or tooth chipping off the denture. And then I went to Seattle with John Coyce. I understood more in a week with him than 10 years studying occlusion here in France. And John Coyce says that occlusion is a difficult topic because it's a field where we have very, very few evidence. It's very difficult to build a study where you can prove that canine guidance is better than a group function or any other thing, that using this type of articulator rather than the other one would make your treatments better. It's very, very difficult to find that evidence in the literature. But still, we need occlusal concepts to treat patients. So there are many things in occlusion. I think it's linked to the history of the discipline, because we had the gnatologist who thought the chewing machine that we have was only mechanical. So that's when they all studied those Bennett angles and condylar pathways and making fully adapted articulators. That was crazy. I mean, who can do that today on a patient? It's too time consuming. It's too expensive. People can't afford it. We have to make it very physiological. I mean, we have to understand how the system works. I mean, it's all about mastication and MIP. It's basically it's like this. You have three things if you want to master occlusion. First, you have to master the position of the condyles in the fossa, right? You have to make sure they're centered. Second thing, when your condyles are well positioned, you have to build your MIP with posterior contacts. And it's not about tripodism or stuff or complicated stuff like that. It's all about cuspid fossa relationships. So you build simultaneous contacts on the posteriors, equal intensity, and then you have to make sure that during mastication, you have no interference on the anterior teeth. In that way, you prevent wear, tooth wear, functional wear. You have many dentists, when they see wear on the front teeth, they think parafunction. It's not true. It's sometimes, very often, it can be functional occlusion with too much friction on the anterior teeth. So once you build your treatment planning with those easy to understand concepts, you can never go back. I think it's a very powerful tool to master occlusion. If you master the science of occlusion, you prevent yourself from many nightmares in practice.
So then that begs the question. Now there's companies that are saying, I'm going to move all your teeth around and do braces, and we don't even need a doctor. We're going to do this direct, Smiles Direct Club. There's companies, Smiles Direct Club, Candid, Easy Smile, Dandy, Bite, Smile Love, Snap Correct. Is Smiles Direct Club selling direct to the individual in France, or are there laws that don't allow that to happen?
What do you mean, Smile Direct's club?
Where the clear aligners, where you go to a
Right.
store, they scan you, and then they just mail you the aligners, and you never had to go to the doctor's office.
No, we don't have that, because we have we have I don't know how to say it. It's called l'ordre, the order of our profession. They are being really careful of not having. We had at the time the tooth whitening bars, they were called tooth whitening bars, opening all over France, and they were doing really bad French cuisine in there. I mean, mixing bleaching agents. They were not controlling the concentration of the products. They were doing more harm than good. A lot of treatments were inefficient. So the order of the profession ordered the closing of this. So we don't have. If you want to have something fixed on your teeth, you need to go to the dentist. No other profession are allowed to practice dentistry in the mouth of a patient. Even we had some issues with lab technicians performing impressions and making dentures in the mouth and they all got to jail.
Wow.
So yeah, it's quite protective. I mean, for us, we have a degree and we stand for it. We don't let other people, coming from anywhere, doing dentistry in some very uncontrolled ways.
And my gosh, I think I've asked you all my questions. You're so I really enjoyed this.
Okay, so let me give you a few tips for young dentists, if you like. I'm really into teaching because I think it's a part of our mission. I mean, our first mission is to treat patients, but in the Hippocratic Oath, Hippocrates also mentioned that we should teach medical science to the other doctors who will come after us. So I'm very, very interested in teaching and transmitting the knowledge that I got from really great mentors. I mentioned John Coyce, but I have so many others, great dentists I learned from. And I like to spend time with young dentists and students because I remember myself being a young dentist and a student, and I was overwhelmed by the amount of knowledge that I would need to master to become a good dentist. So first advice would be that to keep on learning, never stop learning. I mean, medicine and biology is an endless field of knowledge. I mean, you won't get all over it in a lifetime. So keep on reading about medicine, reading about dentistry, try to understand what it's all about. And that's don't ever consider yourself that you've seen it all or you've learned it all. The second advice would be that when you come out of school, you're a bit slow, aren't you? I mean, it's not slow in your mind, but slow with your hands. So you need to go faster. That doesn't mean you have to cut on the quality of your job, but you have to push yourself to make the procedure right and fast, because the faster you work, the better for your patients and for your practice. The third piece of advice would be you have to master communication with your patients. That's really, really important. It's not only about technicity. It's not about procedures. It's also about being a good doctor. And nobody knows what the future will be. Maybe we'll be treated by robots or or with artificial intelligence, who knows? But still, people really like to feel good with their doctor. It's not a fun place to be for a patient in the practice, but try to be a nice guy and try to stay zen. It's very stressful profession. It's a very stressful job. So find all the ways you can to stay rooted in the reality. And you also have to communicate the value of your work. That's very important, because if you want to achieve very high standards of quality, you have to show that. Show that to your patients, and show that with the people you work with. I mean, there could be other dentists or other doctors around you. And the last thing would be to create a team to work with. I mean, the first person you work with, maybe your dental assistants, of course, but also your lab technicians. It's very important. I go every single week, I spend one afternoon, a few hours at the dental lab with my technicians. We discuss cases. I make sure that everything's going fine on my cases. Even if I don't have any problems, I stay there because they are a great source of information. Lab technicians, if you want to get better results in prosthodontics, you have to really work hand in hand with your lab technicians. That's it.
I was gonna say, you really like Greeks. I mean, you keep mentioning Kois and Hippocrates. How did everybody say his name? Hippocrates. So, which one did you like more, John Kois or Hippocrates? Do you have
that's
a favorite?
A tricky question.
But I was trying to find that because you said, you think the Hippocratic Oath is you think first do no harm, but I just looked up. I swear by Apollo, the physician, all the gods and goddesses are my witness, that according to my ability and judgment, I will keep this oath. And to hold him who taught me this art equally dear to me as my parents. To hold him who taught me this art, your teacher, equally dear to me as my parents. So your teachers are as sacred as your parents. To be a partner in life, go ahead.
Yeah, it's true. We're running out of time, but I don't want to tell you all my professional journey, but I'm really passionate about medicine. I didn't want to choose a job where I would have to sell and buy things. I wanted to do something with a higher moral value, and medicine is not about performing procedures and get the money out of it. It has to be something more philosophical. It's very important. It's a shame sometimes when I see doctors. They do that only for the paycheck. It's just a hobby. No, it has to be passion. You have to be committed to medicine if you want to practice it well. And to make it a very noble science, because I think it is a noble activity, a noble job to live with. So those standards of ethics and philosophy in medicines, they should be reminded sometimes. And unfortunately, we only talk about techniques and procedures and equipments and stuff like that, but we also have to think about what we do and have a reflection on that. It's really important.
But you know what? The only reason we can talk about the Hippocratic Oath is because somebody translated it from ancient Greece to what it is now. So seriously, I really, really hope you do translate Pierre Fauchard, because I can still remember it was in '94, and I paid a lot of money for those 3 books, and
Is it an original edition?
I got the first 3 books he wrote, autographed and signed.
How many pages are there?
It's probably, well, I want to say 2 inches, but I don't know how many centimeters that'd be. What? But yeah, it's a good sized book. But again, I was like, wow, it was shocking, but it made me feel good because as I was reading this, I was shocked at how far back they were just at the turn of the century. I think the first book I have was written by 1898. The second one was 1901. And I think the third one is 1903. So just at the turn of the century. But oh my God, they were way, 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 way back. So then the whole time I was like, oh my God, I wonder how far Pierre was. Pierre might have been, he might have been way back. And in fact, it was interesting. Our Thanksgiving was just in November. And it's when the Pilgrims left Plymouth, England, and they came to Plymouth, Massachusetts, that colony. I thought it was interesting. The first English dentist didn't come for another 130 years. So the Pilgrims got here 130 years before, a dentist showed up. And I really think that someone has to historically. You should just go down to the Pierre Fauchard Museum and say, "Can I just sit here and read this book?" And it's got to be in English because, like say, the Hippocratic Oath. I've read that so many times, and I never even understood what you just said about that. You got to hold your teachers to hold him who taught me this art of dentistry as equally dear as my parents. To be a partner in life with him. And to fulfill his needs when required, to look upon his offspring as equals to my own siblings and to teach them this art. And I've always said the only value of knowledge is in our replacement. If you can't transfer your knowledge, then you don't have any knowledge.
And that was all the purpose of the blog, The Dentalist. It was to not to keep the information for myself, but to share it freely to all my colleagues all over the world. And there is a now growing community of French-speaking dentists in Canada, in Quebec, in Switzerland, in Belgium, in North and Central Africa, and I'm very happy to see that. I get comments and emails and people telling me that it's very useful because sometimes in countries like Algeria they don't have much of CE courses, or the dental school they don't have very insufficient means to practice and teach. So I'm glad I made this contribution to the dental community.
And the vaccine, every president of every country is controversial and they do good and bad. But this last one had Operation Warp Speed to bring this out fast. And who ran it? A boy born poor in Morocco with his mom who came over here. And what I was most amazed at the internet is, I think Africa has like 58 countries, and me and the boys have been to half of them. And what I couldn't believe is that just because of a smartphone, an Android, a cell phone tower, I would run into dentists who watched 2 or 3 hours on the internet, on YouTube, on say endo or implants or whatever. And it was amazing how much that cell phone was transferring data. And I have met a dentist, at least a handful of dentists in the most remote areas of the world that I would absolutely let them do an extraction or a root canal on me. And that is really, really cool. But hey, man, thanks for all your contributions to dentistry around the world, your website, and for taking the time to stay up way past your bedtime. France is 9 hours ahead of Phoenix, Arizona, and he passed up an evening of drinking red wine to come on the show with me. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Howard, and congratulations for what you do for the community of dentistry. It's just great. It's amazing. Congratulations on that. Thanks for having me, and thank you everybody for listening. And remember, France is a chance.